I want to give a special shout out to Lynn and to ANAD for believing that bringing somebody like me back, or me, back to talk to a field that was in its infancy when I began my recovery in 1984, that there would be value in hearing my story and how I didn't just get into recovery, which used to be the holy grail for those of you who were in the field 30-some years ago. We weren't even sure it was possible. It was the thing that everybody wanted, but nobody knew anybody who had it. And then a few years ago, what I decided to do, a little bit reluctantly, was come back out and write about how I got to 30 years of recovery. I kept waiting for somebody else to write the book, to be honest with you. I've moved on. I'm in the field of positive psychology. I'm not really in the eating disorder field. My heart is in the eating disorder field, always will be. I gave my blood, my body, my life, my finances, everything I had 20-some years ago to the field because I believe so strongly in whatever we have to do to give people hope. Hope is what people want. There are many ways to recover. There are many different ways that you can turn the key in the lock of somebody who really wants to get better. And so I believe that if you give people hope, though, you've given them the keys to the kingdom. And because one woman gave me hope, I'm alive. And I'll tell you that story today. So thank you, ANAD, for taking a risk and inviting a non-clinician to talk to such an important group. And I want to thank all of you for being in this field, truly. The gratitude I have, first of all, that there's even a treatment center out there. I was on television hundreds of times in the 1980s, just begging people to understand that we weren't monsters, that we weren't these strange bugs. Or sorority sisters who were selfish and doing this just because we wanted to be bulimic. And there was no treatment. There was no treatment. I just remember thinking one day there's going to be treatment for people. I walk down the hallway and I see all these beautiful brochures and these residential centers and I think, what a great world we live in. So thank you, all of you, for doing the work you do. It's truly needed and appreciated. If you had met me in June of 1983, you might have thought, well, that's a woman who has the world by the tail. I was 21 years old, a newly minted Harvard graduate, magna cum laude. I was married to the captain of Harvard lacrosse. I had a great job. I looked good. I was tall, athletic, blonde, relatively slender, just, fit looking. You would have thought that woman, she's got a great life ahead of her. But if you had known me, as a therapist told me later, I was a billboard. I looked good in the front, and there was nothing behind me. I was a shell. My gums were eroding. My teeth were crumbling. At the age of 21, I had never had a menstrual period, and no one had ever noticed. I had lost my sport of swimming. I had so few friends left, I can honestly say knew me, that I had nobody to ask to be a bridesmaid in my wedding. So I looked good, and I had everything to live for, but I had absolutely no idea how to live. That's who I was in June of 1983. And then, in February of 1984, everything changed. Everything changed. My secret of bulimia, I had very sadly and reluctantly disclosed to my husband, Haywood, in the summer of 1983 after a desperate day of binging and purging, I think at least 15 times. I remember the blood coming out of my throat. I remember my salivary glands were swollen. I remember my hair was matted with vomit. And I had done this like a robot all day, back and forth. It was a hot day in Baltimore, and I couldn't stop. So my husband came home from his law firm, and I just started to cry, and I said, I have a secret to tell you. And he just looked at me. He's like, you just married me. What could you possibly be telling me that I don't know about you? And I said, well, nobody knows this, but I'm in my 8th year of bulimia, and I'm afraid I'm going to die. Karen Carpenter died in February of 1983, and that was when I began to really think, this is going to kill me. It's not like I didn't want to get better. I woke up every day at Harvard thinking, today is the day that I'm not going to do it. Today's the day I'm not going to go into Harvard Yard and shoplift laxatives, syrup of Ipecac, cereal, whatever I had to do to get my fill of food. Every day I said, this is the day I'm not going to do it. And I continued, to perform. I continued to get the grades, and I continued to do the things that I'd always thought were going to make me happy. I was told they would make me happy. So I'm telling my husband this, and I'm saying, I don't want to be like this. I just don't know what to do. There was nowhere to go. I can't emphasize that enough. There was nowhere to go. I think there was a padded room at Shepherd Pratt Hospital, and that was it. There may have been the Rader centers out in California, maybe 1 or 2 hospital units. But if you were bulimic, or even anorexic, but I'm speaking mostly from the perspective of a bulimic, you were going to die. So my husband's eyes are wide with fear, and he says, don't worry, I'll help you. I'll follow you in the bathroom, which of course only made it worse. So it drove me further underground. I told him I was getting better. That was a lie. I would leave my job. I was working for the founder of Harbor Place and all the different festival marketplaces, James Rouse. Wonderful job, but I would leave my job to go to the mall and buy food so that I could then throw it up. So I was living a desperate, desperate lie. Then in February of 1984, I walked through this red door. This is Roland Park Presbyterian Church in Baltimore. Any of you from Baltimore? All right, so it's a suburb of Baltimore, Roland Park is. And I had a few months earlier stumbled into a 12-step program, Overeaters Anonymous, because frankly it was free. They were going to talk about food. I thought I can fit in anywhere they're talking about food. So I had found a fellowship. I found people who didn't judge me. I found people who talked openly about their obsession with food. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to swim fast. I didn't have to be a great writer. I didn't have to do anything other than show up and listen and be kind. So everything changed, though, in February of 1984 when I walked through that door and I sat down for what I thought was just another meeting. And I pulled my needlepoint out, and I'm working on my needlepoint as we read the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And then the speaker starts to speak. Stands up. I look over at her. She looks like me. She's tall. She's blonde. She's athletic. She's well-spoken. And then she says the sentence that saved my life. She said, my name is Betsy, and I'm recovering from bulimia one day at a time. And I still get goosebumps when I say that sentence, because I had never, ever heard anybody say those words all at once, in a sentence. I didn't know anybody was recovering. I didn't think it was possible. I'm looking at this unicorn, and I suddenly, after signing my death certificate at 14, when 2 girls showed me how to purge my food during school one day when I was in 9th grade, suddenly I feel like somebody just signed my birth certificate. She gave me hope. Betsy gave me hope. And because she was there to give back, because she was there not because she was going to get anything, not because anybody told her she had to be there, because she wanted to give back, because she was there, I got my life back, because she told that story. And everything changed. Everything changed. I went up to Betsy at the end of the meeting and I said, will you sponsor me? What that meant was, would she take me under her wing? Would she allow me to call her every night and just, say, how did your day go? Would you take me grocery shopping? I didn't know how to grocery shop anymore. Again, an Ivy League graduate, everything to live for, and I didn't even know how to feed myself. So she agreed. And for the next few years, Betsy and other people helped me find my way back to life. And to be honest, after growing up in Washington, D.C., where I was told you had to get the right SAT scores, you have to play Beethoven's Concerto No. 1 in C major by the age of 13 on the piano. You have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And when you get those accolades, when you have the bumper sticker virtues, you're going to be happy. And the first time I felt real joy was in this program, because I learned what happiness was. I learned that happiness was about waking up and doing your best. I learned that happiness was about telling the truth. I learned that happiness was about giving back. There was a sentence I heard there that I've tried to live my life by one day at a time since then. And that is, you can't keep what you don't give away. And I believe that. And I think as I look back at my life over the last 35 years, since I walked into that meeting, really not knowing that everything was about to turn upside down, I try to give away all of the kindness, all of the guidance, all of the hope that other people have given me, not just in this field, but in everything I've done in life. And so that's why I'm alive today, a story. So several years after that fateful night, I decided I wanted to write my story. Why? Because back then, nobody knew this was possible. And without a book on the market that was going to make other people hopeful, how was anybody going to find their way the way I had? So I wrote this book in a really hot rush. My name is Caroline. And it came out in February of 1988, and my world turned upside down. And I'm not exaggerating that in any way, shape, or form. Everything changed. An excerpt appeared a year earlier, Washingtonian, My Name is Caroline. People in Washington still remember that cover because it was so provocative. And no one had ever known anybody to publicly admit to this incredibly shameful thing. So I was invited out to lunch with the head of the governing board of National Cathedral School, this girls' school I went to, for 9 years. Loved it. I love school. School's a happy place for me. But he very seriously sat me down to lunch, and he looked at me as we were starting to eat, and he says, "Are you trying to destroy our school?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You know, admissions, our applications are going to go down because of this book you've written." And that was not the first time I was chastised for writing this book. There were a lot of good things that happened because I wrote My Name is Caroline. A lot. I do believe it's my mitzvah to the world. I believe that because I gave this book only to give hope to other people, I do believe hundreds of thousands of people have lived and have gotten hope. At one point, Dear Abby wrote about me because I started a foundation just to give away information, to explain what is anorexia, what is bulimia, and what can you do about it. Just very basic things. A foundation called the Foundation for Education about eating disorders. Dear Abby wrote about me, and I had to go to the post office not far from where I live, and because I got a little slip saying you have to come to the post office to get your mail. So I showed up, and every single person who worked at the Roland Park post office went in the back and came back with a box with letters heaping, and they said, "Did you win the lottery?" No, I didn't. This was just the response from Dear Abby putting something about me and my foundation in her syndicated column. That was how desperate the world was. I even was giving birth to my third child, Baird, in 1995, and as I was in labor, a nurse leaned over and she said, "You wrote that book, didn't you?" And that's happened to me in my children's classrooms, on sports fields, everywhere. This book changed everything, and there was so much good that came from it. There was also a lot of bad. Let me share some of the bad. I was judged by so many people. I had embarrassed my family. I had shamed my school. In one case, I went to talk at a treatment center in 1990, a treatment center that wanted me to send anybody who wrote to me to them. They wanted to give me a $5,000 bounty for everybody who wrote to me. And they flew me out to look at it, knowing full well what my book talked about. And as I get there, I realize it's a very deeply, I'll just say, religious treatment center. And I didn't know that, and it certainly works for a lot of people, but it wasn't the path I had taken. So at the end of the day, I said, I don't feel like this is the right place for me to affiliate myself with. I wish you had told me, but I think you're going to have to find somebody else to be your spokesperson. I got back home, and a big packet of letters arrived, and every single person at that treatment center had been told terrible things about me and that I wasn't in recovery. And so they all said that they were praying for me and praying for my soul because I clearly hadn't seen the right way through life and that I was probably not in recovery. That's not the only time I've heard that. I went to London with my very best friend in the year 2000, I think, and on the third day of us traveling together, living together, sharing a bathroom, she looked at me with real astonishment and she said, "You're really over that thing, aren't you?" And I said, you didn't believe I was? And she said, "How could anybody know for sure if you're really over this?" And I began to believe that, wow, I'm not sure I can really prove it. There was a well-known television anchor who got me on her show, and she asked me a few softball questions, and then suddenly she leaned in and she said, "But you're very thin, aren't you?" And she was trying to get me. She was trying to get me to admit that because I didn't have the look she was looking for. Because I always looked like this, essentially, both in my eating disorder and in my recovery, people told me I didn't look the part of a recovering bulimic. So I have been attacked from all sides, within the field, outside the field, by friends, by family. It's been hard, but I don't regret it for a moment. I really don't. And I'm not just here to tell you some of my story, because I do think, I watched the show Mindhunter. How many of you watched Mindhunter? Okay. There was a great episode a few weeks ago where they went back into the prisons to interview serial killers because the FBI profiling unit wasn't catching serial killers. They were coming up with these fancy psychiatric ideas about what they must think about and do and the rest of it. Finally, one of the profilers said, "We have to go talk to serial killers to figure out how to catch serial killers." And so they went back and the guy said, "The only reason you're catching people now is because you came and talked to me." And so I believe in order to understand how to get into long-term recovery, something I still think people don't think is really possible, unbroken recovery for 30-some years. I had never had my period until the age of 21. I was a competitive swimmer. And not one person ever noticed. Nobody noticed. It's like nobody was really paying attention. No one was asking the right questions. And so once I was safe again, once I was with someone who loved me, that's when my body started to work. And fortunately, all of the damage I had done, the crumbling teeth, the eroding gums, some of it I could not turn the clock back on. My fertility did come back. At one point, I thought I'd be unable to have children. It did come back, and I've been blessed with 3 extraordinary children who are all adults now. And so that's one of the things that was such a blessing to me. But after I had my daughter, I realized that I needed to step away from the field. I had done hundreds and hundreds of television appearances. I'd spoken to very small groups of people in the eating disorder field, again, because this didn't exist. This didn't exist. And I was getting so many letters and so many desperate people that I realized I had to step back and take care of myself. And I had to be a mother. And so I somewhat reluctantly stepped back, but I have been watching. And I have been listening. And I still get so many people reaching out to me, asking me, what do I think about the field? They've been in and out of treatment centers. They want me to tell them what worked for me. Not only that, my daughter, as she was growing up, she would bring her friends home. And it was never a secret. It was never a secret that I had an eating disorder. Another thing I've been criticized for. Why did I expose my children to this ugly story? But I did. It was a choice I made. I felt people needed the story. But these little girls would come sit in my kitchen. They knew about my eating disorder. And they would start to talk to me about their mothers. Why didn't their mothers eat dinner with them? Why did their mothers take diet pills? Why were their mothers always on scales? They wanted to know if I could help their mothers. And one day one person said to me, "Mrs. Miller, you're the only adult woman I know who likes her body and who doesn't talk about weight all the time." And that's when I began to really see that there weren't a lot of adult recovery role models for our young females to look up to. Another time, a girl who'd been in and out of treatment centers came in and she said, I don't want to go back anymore. I don't want to go back to treatment because I don't know if it's worth it. Can you even stay in recovery? Does anyone stay in recovery? She said, you're the only person I know who's stayed in recovery. And my message to all of you is, if people don't have hope that they can go to treatment and do the work, that they will stay in recovery, if they don't know that because they haven't heard a story, they're never going to get better. They just aren't. People need hope. And so that is why I came back out, and we really wanted to give you Positively Caroline, which is my story about how I got to 30 years of recovery, because I opened the kimono more in that book, and I decided I had to tell the full truth about my family of origin, which is a very destructive family. I never would have made it if there had been family treatment that my parents had to go to. My father was my abuser. My mother would watch. She would encourage him. The last time my father hit me was the night before I got married in 1983. And so my mother, a borderline, ended up being somebody who really never wanted good things for me. And my father was her partner. And so I decided that I needed to tell the full truth about my family in that book, because I wanted people to know that you may not have a soft place to fall. You may not have a family that supports you. What are you going to do? I had to create a family around me. It's possible. And so in that book, I really went into more detail about how did I get here. And it was all because I wanted to start this eating disorder center. And so it was just, so devastating for me to have this bestseller, My Name is Caroline, on the market. And then to be bankrupt because I wanted to start a residential treatment center. We were just a few years too early. I know how many great ones are out there, but we were trying to do it. So I very reluctantly went to a psychiatrist, and I said, I think I'm really sad, and I might need antidepressants. It wasn't long after Time magazine that had that smiley face. It was the same smiley face, but it was about Prozac in 1983. And I think I need something. I really don't want to live, but I'm in recovery, and I don't really understand this. So he gave me Prozac, and a few days later I was in a hospital emergency room with one of the rarest side effects, Prozac. I thought, my God, I just failed at the happy drug, so now what? And then I went back, and this is also when I was challenged on, are you really in recovery, lady? So I'll call him Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown is sitting there, and I'm like this, and I'm like, I failed at the happy drug, now what? And so he started to question me, and he said, you said you had this thing, bulimia. Are you really better? Really? Like, can I really believe you? And I was like, what do I have to do to prove it? I can't prove a negative. And he said, because there's something I would like to try, but you will have seizures if you're lying to me. Turned out to be Wellbutrin. And I said, I can't prove it to you, but you can trust me. Over and over, I've found that I've had, at times, to prove that I'm not bulimic. And that, to me, has been an astonishing thing. And it's another reason why we should not be trotting out young women with 1 year of recovery on television and putting them out there as role models the moment they leave treatment. This is a disaster. I can't tell you how much pressure I was under. People watching me shop in the grocery store. I had reporters come into my house and open my refrigerator to see if there was binge food in there. The pressure and the scrutiny that you are under the moment you go public is absolutely unbearable. We cannot do this to people. This is not something that I think that the field has handled particularly well, to be completely honest. And by the way, Betty Ford, her book was published right before mine at Doubleday. Doubleday published My Name is Caroline. She told them, don't buy that woman's book unless she has 4 years of recovery. Because if she doesn't have 4 solid years of recovery, she should not be speaking out. And thank God that was the litmus test at Doubleday. Jacqueline Onassis, by the way, named my book. Jackie Onassis sat at a Doubleday meeting and she said, I want my daughter to be able to ride the New York subways and not have anybody know what the book is about. It was going to be called Dying to be Thin. And then Jackie Onassis said, no, we can't do that. Make it My Name is Caroline. So that's the backstory of what he's named. So anyway, let me just go back to what I believe now, because I went back to school in 2005, and I want to share with you the highlights from my field of positive psychology. I'm an executive coach. I'm an expert in goal setting and the quality of grit, which I'm going to share with you. And so I teach around the world. I did leave this field because I needed to step back and just find myself again. And not just have a calling card that I was a recovering bulimic. I wanted to be something else. I wanted to continue to expand upon what I could do. And so in 2005, at the age of 45, I went back to school for the first time since I graduated from college, and I entered this Master's of Applied Positive Psychology program at Penn with Marty Seligman, who's been a fabulous mentor to me. And I knew that there would be something in this program that would change my life, just like had happened to me in 1984, but I didn't know what. I just had this intuition that my life wouldn't be the same. And while I'm sitting there learning about the science of well-being, how we now know that we are born wired for well-being, but it's only half of the equation. The other half is completely due to what we think about and do every day, who we spend time with. Our happiness is really up to us. What I realized as I sat in these classrooms at Wharton was that I had recovered and stayed in recovery. So I want to share with you some of what I know will work. I know it will work because it worked for me, and now I have a name for it. So my capstone that year at Penn became this bestseller, Creating Your Best Life. It's been named one of the top 10 goal-setting books of all time. Why? Because I was the first person to add research to a book on goal setting. There had never been a book that actually had an evidence base to it. It was the law of attraction. If you want it, you can have it. I don't believe that. I believe that if you want success, there are proven ways to get there, all evidence-based. And so I laid it out there. And so when I grew up in Washington, again, I was told I'd be happy if I had these accomplishments, and I just remember this pervasive emptiness. Nothing made me happy, not for long. The weight, the this, the that, none of it ever made me happy. And so then I'm sitting in these classrooms, and there's this slam dunk piece of research that comes at me called The Benefits of Frequent Positive Affect by 3 of the top people in positive psychology. Sonja Lyubomirsky, Laura King, and Ed Diener, for those of you who know positive psychology. And what it said, with no equivocation, this is not a finding that can be challenged because it's too clear-cut, is that all success in life is preceded by being happy first. We do not succeed at anything until we're flourishing emotionally first. And this has been proven through longitudinal studies, qualitative, quantitative, self-report, correlational, causal, it's all there. And so if you want to succeed at a hard goal like recovery, people have to flourish first. So Ellen's presentation just before mine talks about happiness. How do we amplify our well-being? Well, we know from positive psychology that there are a few things that work pretty much for everybody. And here they are. The first one is gratitude. The happiest people are the most grateful. And there's a number of exercises that have emerged from positive psychology that are very addictive and very powerful. And the one that's gotten a lot of attention is just called 3 blessings. And at the end of the day, you just write down 3 reasons that you were blessed today, things you're grateful for, but then you add the piece why they happened to you. Not your neighbor, not your friend, not your sister. Why did those things happen to you? And that's because the moment you start to do 3 things I'm grateful for and why they happened to me, what you begin to quickly realize is that you put something out into the world that made it possible. And if you don't believe it, just turn it upside down. 3 things that weren't good that happened to me today and why they happened. You very quickly see that you have some control over your destiny. As someone who was early in eating disorder recovery, I would have loved to have had this research. I would have loved to know that the practice of gratitude would amplify my well-being and would then make it more likely for me to succeed. There were a lot of slogans on the walls when I went to both AA. I did get sober 35 years ago. I wanted to put that there because I've been interviewed many times about why am I in recovery when my generation mostly didn't get better. Older women are the ones streaming into treatment centers. We did not get better because we didn't have hope. Betsy saved my life. I'm telling you, a story saves lives. But those slogans that were on the walls at AA and OA, attitude of gratitude, one day at a time, fake it till you make it, those are all things that we now know from research on well-being work. So gratitude, practice of gratitude. Journaling. I am really thrilled to see all the research by James Pennebaker and elsewhere. Just the practice of journaling. Writing down, making meaning of your day. I feel like when I wrote My Name is Caroline, and later Positively Caroline, I was making meaning of my life. I was putting the threads together to say, this is why this happened to me. And I'm just so grateful these things happened to me. Journaling and blogging, actually. The research is finding that blogging has just as powerful an impact on your well-being as does journaling. Meditation is the silver bullet. All of the research, a lot of it done at the University of Wisconsin, is finding it changes your brain structure. And Barbara Fredrickson, who's become a dear friend of mine, she's at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's written fabulous books, Love 2.0, Positivity. She found that loving kindness meditation is really the most powerful in some ways, particularly for people who are low in self-worth. I was a collection of problems. I probably thought that I was the land of broken toys in 1983. And if I had even been introduced to the whole idea of sending love to myself, love to someone I loved, and then love to someone maybe I intended to forgive one day, I think that practice might have changed my life. I think there's also research showing that it changes self-regulation. And we know willpower and impulse control are really big deals, particularly for bulimia. I had no self-control when I was bulimic. There was no reason to have self-control because I could get away with pretty much anything I wanted and not pay the price. Meditation is a wise intervention. Forgiveness is a tricky one. The practice of forgiveness, of being willing to forgive. If you're not ready to forgive, the willingness to forgive has been found to have a lot of very powerful research behind it. Exercise. Now this is something I feel very strongly about. I was a competitive swimmer, as I said a little bit earlier. And I think when you go into treatment and you're a compulsive exerciser, which pretty much most bulimics, I think, have been or are at one time or another, there's a really powerful role it can play in your life. And so to take it away completely, I think is a little bit dicey. So exercise, particularly interval training, is found to be a real mood lifter. And then also altruism, just the practice of being a giver. And I think this is where Overeaters Anonymous and AA really had the biggest impact on me, because I was not a giver. It was all about what do I have to do to succeed when I was growing up. This was the program that taught me that giving is the blessing. And so just being able to give of your time, what if clients who came in who were low on well-being just went out and found a way to give to somebody else? Giving my story to somebody who has less recovery than me made me feel great. I felt like a winner just because I was showing up and doing my best one day at a time. So being able to turn around and just listen to somebody's story, give them hope. There's so many ways to introduce altruism. I want to say a little bit more about this. I use the VIA with my clients. So I use this free character strengths test that I wish I had had this back in 1983. So if you go to VIA Character, VIACharacter.org, there is a free character strengths test. It ranks your character strengths from 1 to 24. And the research is finding that just taking the test and knowing what your top strengths are, we work with top 5 to top 7, just knowing what they are is a win. Because you're unique. You're not a collection of symptoms. You're somebody who does something really well. These strengths are at the top. It's your fingerprint. It's unique to you. And so what if somebody is high in fairness? What if someone is high in creativity? You can challenge them to say, how can you use this top strength of yours, creativity, to deal with these obstacles that are in your life, the things that are really kicking your butt, that are making it hard for you to recover. Challenge people to lean into their top strengths so that they can have a win. Because we also know that simply using your top strengths in new ways makes people happier. We're looking at how do we help people flourish so that they're more likely to succeed. So this was the first test. When I went to Penn, the first assignment was to take the VIA character strengths and just get your strengths. The second one was, how have those top 5 strengths been used in such a way that you had a win, that you made a difference, you had an aha moment, you had a eureka moment. And I was really puzzled when I saw my top 5 strengths. Why? I was so used to seeing myself as somebody who didn't have success. That to see these top 5, I thought, wow, when did I use all of those to be at my best? And it popped into my mind when I wrote My Name is Caroline. Every positive thing about me came out in the writing of that book. I loved myself enough to save my own life. And I loved other people enough to want to share that story. Creativity. When you write a book, you obviously have to be creative. Bravery. Now, this is the one that I find really interesting. I've been told over and over, you're so brave to do this, you're so brave, courageous, blah, blah, blah. None of that's true in my heart. I don't believe I was brave or courageous. I believe I had no choice. I had no choice except to step up and say, look, somebody got better. And so bravery is what I think came out, even if I didn't identify it as that. You know, if you hit bottom at 22, there was nowhere to go but up, really. So I accumulated a certain amount of wisdom simply because I had been so down, so young. And then zest, this is really interesting. The quality of zest is really a big topic in positive psychology, because it's one of the top 5 strengths associated with flourishing. Love is one of them. Zest is another one. Hope is one. Curiosity is another one. And then hope, optimism, future-mindedness, love, zest, curiosity, and gratitude. Those are the 5 most associated with flourishing. But zest, when I see zest flow in people who are young, you know, the joie de vivre is on. They can't joke with anyone. They can't tease anybody. There's nothing that they wake up for. I believe that zest of mine, that inner bitch, if I have to say it like that, I had a streak. It's like, damn it, this thing is not going to kill me. I'm not going to let it kill me. That energy, that force of life, I'm convinced, is a piece of what Betsy tapped into that night. And so if you have a client who takes the VIA and their top 5 comes up, ask them, who are you at your best? How are these being used? Help people to identify with who they are at their best. It makes a difference, because then you have a blueprint. You have a blueprint that you can go out and replicate. That context, that dose of strengths. You can also overuse your strengths, and I believe I sent a handout about this. But you can overuse things like zest. You can blow people out of the water with your energy. You can be too brave. You can be reckless and impetuous. So you always have to look for the sweet spot with your strengths. Another thing that I think positive psychology can bring to this field is really, really important, particularly for people like me who are so focused on performance and winning and being the best, is I was introduced to Locke and Latham's goal-setting theory. It's one of the most proven theories in management. You see it a lot in industrial psychology. But Locke and Latham have found that too often people fail at their goals because they apply learning goal metrics to performance goals. Meaning the performance goals are things you've done before. You know how to do them, you know what the metric of progress is, you know who you need to help you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But performance goals are very specific and rigid in many ways, and there's a place for them. The problem is that too often we're in learning goal situations where we've never done it before. We don't know how to get from A to B to C. And when you're early in recovery, it's a complete learning goal condition. And so what do we do in learning goal conditions? You have to learn, you have to take the brakes off on judging it and say, I'm going to do my best in this situation. I'm going to find people, again, to be mentors, people who will help me learn the right skills. That allows people to engage in goal pursuit without worrying about the outcome as much. I remember it was a big deal for me in 1984 when I stopped wearing belts. I stopped wearing belts because I could count the notches. It was like that, I was constantly involved in performance goals. And my recovery took off when I stopped needing to fit everything. I remember once I pulled out my shorts from 8th grade to try them on because for some crazy reason I thought that was the barometer of success. If I could wear clothes from when I was 13 years old. And I remember thinking, this is insane, Caroline. I gave 3 or 4 bags of clothing to Goodwill that day because I realized I was just weighing and measuring my life in every possible way. And for that reason, I have not been on a scale since 1984. I don't know what I weigh, and I don't care. My doctors weigh me backwards because I taught all of them that if I stand on a scale and turn around, I won't know where the bars are going, but I have to plug my ears too. So they thought I was crazy. But every doctor I've ever seen has a big red sticker on the front, "Don't tell Mrs. Miller her weight." And then they'll say, you know, well, why is this? And I'll say, I will know where the bars are going if I hear them. So don't weigh me. And then I think we have to engage people in not what's the goal, but what's the dream? What's the dream? When people focus on problem solving, it's a certain frame of mind. You're just thinking about transactional kind of, problems. How do you solve it? How do you solve that? Richard Boyatzis is at Case Western University, and he has found that when you ask people, what's the dream? What's the ideal? Who do you want to become? It's a very different type of mindset. And then there's hope. No one ever asked me who I wanted to become. Never. It was like, what job do you want to have? What size? What this? What's that? So I am a black belt in Hapkido, which is also something I think women in the martial arts and women who have eating disorders all ought to be exposed to self-defense, period. End of story. I can talk to you more about it later, but any of you who are curious. But in many ways, being in the martial arts teaches you bull setting because you have the belts, you have the stripes, you have the baggy uniforms, but we know that the #1 deterrent to sexual assault on college campuses is self-defense training. I walk taller, my shoulders are back more. I know I can defend myself if I run into something or a situation that is scary. And I had a moment in the martial arts that no therapy had ever cured me of, and that was the abuse I went through. And even though I talked about it, even though I was intellectually aware of how I needed to forgive my father, this wonderful man everybody loved, but who had picked me to be his punching bag, I knew that I needed to forgive him. And I talked about it, and I talked about it, and I talked about it with 4 separate therapists in group therapy. And then I got into the martial arts. And I was in a fight one day with a cop. Crazy Kevin is what we called him, because he was out of control when he was fighting. And I was a good fighter. I had long arms and legs. I could get in there and really get there. And so the men weren't quite sure what to do when they were fighting with me. So he was a little out of control the day I was sparring with him. And I had my chest guard on and my mouth guard and punching, and I'm loving every second of it. I really loved it. And then he hit me a little bit too hard at times, but there, at the end of the match, we bowed to each other, and it ended. And I went in the locker room to take all of my gear off, and in that moment, all of the residue of being beaten up by my father went away in a flash, because I could now defend myself. And I had just been in a fair fight with another man, and I'd looked him in the eyes and done my best. And I really do believe that learning how to stand up to men and meet their eyes, because 90% of women are killed by an intimate partner, and many, many women with eating disorders had their bodies violated in one way or another. Learning how to meet someone with their eyes and know that you can defend yourself is one of the most empowering things that ever happened to me. When I work on goal setting with executives and organizations, this is what I ask, this is what I work on, which is, who is your best possible future self? Who is it you most want to be? And we find that people quite often have never paused in their lives to ask themselves, who is my ideal self? The research shows that a lot of us are living as our actual self, the person we're showing up as, or as our ought self, the person we think we should be. A lot of people with eating disorders are living in the ought self and the should self. This is one of the most studied exercises in positive psychology. Best possible future self has so many outcomes that are emotionally positive that just about everybody uses it. And it's very simple. Imagine yourself 10 years in the future as if everything has gone as well as possible. We find that it creates more hope. Again, we're getting back to hope. How do you create hope? How do you evoke zest? How do you get people curious about their future? How do you help them to clarify their goals? This has been a game changer for everyone I've ever taught it to. But again, the research is very solid behind it. So ask people to look beyond the board, past the problem. When you're in recovery, what's waiting for you? What's on the other side of that? Who else can you become? So too often I think we do focus on the problem. A few other things I want to share that really changed my life and changed my recovery. There's an economic theory called peak-end rule. Have any of you heard of peak-end rule? Okay, so I learned this in positive psychology, and I realized that this was also the key to why I recovered from my eating disorder and stayed in recovery. We remember experiences in our lives in two ways. The peak of that experience, but how it ended. And when so many things are ripped from you because of your eating disorder, like my swimming career, I had nothing but regrets. I was a bundle of regrets. The piano, the college. I remember my mother said to me very derisively as I was applying to Penn, she said, "Why would you go back to school when you vomited your way through Harvard?" That was a real mood lifter. And so, she wasn't my first line of defense. And so when I learned peak-end rule, it gave me new sets of tools to go back and close the loop on all the things I had lost to my eating disorder. So I started, this is me thinking I'm fat at the age of 12 as a swim champion. Do you see a fat, ugly little girl? I don't now, but I did then. It was only 2 years after that I started my bulimia. But what I did was I went back to swimming at the age of 40, I'm going to say 40. I took 20-some years off. I had ended my career in ignominy. I just remember my coach didn't know what I was doing. My teammates didn't know what I was doing, even though there were other people with eating disorders on the team. But I lost it all. And when I left my beloved sport, I had nothing but sadness. I went back to it at 40 because I wanted to, not because anyone else wanted me to swim. I was comfortable in a bathing suit. I wasn't when I was a teenager because just because. And so I'm swimming. I'm doing it because I love it. I find myself at Masters Nationals in 2014 as a nationally ranked swimmer. And I'm in some hard events. And I'm so nervous before my biggest, longest event, the 200-meter IM. As I'm getting ready for it, I hear my name being called. Caroline, Caroline. And I look over, and it's my coach from Harvard. A woman I'd lost all relationship with because of my eating disorder. All she knew was that I was a mess, and I was angry, and I didn't want to be at practice. So she's waving at me, Caroline, and I go over, I was like, Stephanie, it's so great to see you. And I said, I need to apologize for you. I need to make amends for how I left our relationship back in 79, 80. And I had an eating disorder, and she says, I always wondered. She said, I heard about your book. I haven't read it, but, I wish I'd been there for you. I wish you would talk to me. I wish you would let somebody in on your pain. And I said, well, thank you, but really I just need to make my amends, and I'm so glad to see you and do this in person. And I said, and I'm about to swim the 200-meter IM. And I said, the last time I swam it in 1980, I was swimming it for you. And I said, today I'm swimming it for me. And she was cheering for me all the way. She died last year from colon cancer. The fact that I was able to have that moment with her just has made all the difference in how I look back on my eating disorder. And other things I had used the peak-end rule with. I lost my piano. I realized I could go back to it. I became the accompanist at my kids' schools. College, when I went back to Penn, I realized that was my redo. I could go back to school and not be vomiting my way through classes. And so I think that this theory, this holds a lot of power for anybody who's experienced a lot of losses to their eating disorder. Find that regret. And as they approach their future goals and dreams, how can you go back and end it under your own control in a way that gives you power and allows you to move on without regrets? That's been very healing for me. And finally, the last few things I want to leave you with is, The reason why I wrote the book Getting Grit is because after I wrote Creating Your Best Life About Goals, one of the things we know about happy people is they wake up every day to hard goals. Not easy goals, hard goals. They get up and test themselves. Because at the end of the day, whether you know it or not, we all scan our days for what we're proud of. And the things people are proud of are the things they did that were outside of their comfort zone. Recovery is outside of your comfort zone. Every day is hard. And so we know from Angela Duckworth's research on grit that if you're going to accomplish hard goals, you need this quality called grit. And so I decided I had to write about it, but I didn't want to write a book about a quality that only some people could have. You had to be born with it, or you had to come from a certain family. I only wanted to write Getting Grit if people could cultivate it. And I realized in a flash that, again, my eating disorder is what taught me that success is not grit. I had success and talent and all the things you wanted when I was late teens, early 20s. I had the bumper sticker resume. What I didn't have was grit. Because I stayed inside my comfort zone and did things that I knew I wouldn't have to work too hard for. Bulimia was the first thing that kicked my butt, that I couldn't beat. And in the process of my biggest vulnerability and my weakness, bottoming out from this eating disorder, that's how I cultivated grit. And that's the promise to hold out to everybody who needs to recover from something like this. They're in the process of cultivating character. And so when I wrote Getting Grit, it's all about what are the character strengths we need to overcome hard things. Because when we do this, we change the world. We change the world one person at a time. Malala Yousafzai, for me, is the example of the kind of grit, somebody who faces hard challenges with dignity and self-respect and love and patience and self-regulation. That's the kind of grit we can all cultivate. And if you're going to hit 30 years of recovery, you better understand grit, because it's going to take grit. It's going to be hard. When I'm interviewed for my other books about anything on television all over the world, whenever I get asked the question, what are you proudest of? I always say overcoming my bulimia. I have never, ever shied away from my story, because I believe it made me who I am. I believe it made me tougher, bolder, wiser, happier, more loving. Everything good that's happened to me in the last 35 years has happened to me because of my eating disorder. And it taught me grit. And it's really all about ordinary grit. Again, I'm right at the end here, but it's not about, the Olympic superstar grit. When you have this kind of quality where you're dealing with hard things one day at a time, you're like this man, Kevin Downs, that I wrote about in Getting Grit, an Iraq War paraplegic who was in an IED accident in a Humvee. The other 5 people in the Jeep were killed. He's the only one who survived, but he survived with mangled arms and legs. He was sent back home to Tennessee, where he woke up every day feeling like he had no purpose anymore. He had felt like he had purpose, duty, honor, country. He was doing what he thought was right overseas. And when he came back home, he had nothing to wake up for. So he called the high school in Tennessee, where he had been a 3-sport athlete, and he said, can I come cut the grass? And they said, of course you can come cut the grass. We'll get you a riding mower, no problem. So glad you want to come back. And so Kevin Downs, a Iraq War veteran, starts to cut the grass on the football field again, where he had been a star. And the coach noticed that something changed. And I saw him being interviewed on ESPN, which is how I heard this story. He said that the moment this Iraq War veteran started to cut the grass, not giving speeches about patriotism, not giving speeches about how to be tougher, every single person on the football team stopped whining. I'll be done in a minute. Every single person on the football team stopped whining. And that's when I realized that this kind of ordinary grit that all of us have, we can communicate and impact other people with what we call the authentic effect. When you do hard things and you're not broadcasting it, you will awe and inspire other people. That is what I hope I have done in the process of sharing my story one day at a time over many years. This is what we all can do, because you know what? We all have stories. We all have stories we can share with other people. I have concerns about where I wish this field would go. I'd love to talk more about this if any of you want to talk with me privately, but we need more recovering role models in this field who have 30 years of recovery. If those role models are not put out there widely, I promise you, there are young adults who will not go into treatment because they will not believe it's going to last. I hear from them all the time. We need to stop putting celebrities with 1 or 2 years of recovery out as our role models. We have to get back to what are the stories that give people hope, that awe them, that inspire them, that make them want to be better people. So I hope the field continues to move in that direction. I have everything I need now. I have love, I have my life back, I have 3 adult children, I have a career I love, but it's all because somebody told their story one night when I was vulnerable and not sure I would live. And so I would like all of you to remember that you can't keep what you don't give away. Give away your stories, give away your hope, give away your courage, give away the things that you know other people need. Give it away without expecting anything back. And all of us are going to be better, and the world is going to be full of more people with joy, health, life, and recovery. Thank you so much.